Hello, everyone. Good evening. I have the privilege of inviting a renowned academician who is a professor at a renowned university in the country. You know what happened recently? I was going through my some YouTube videos, and a YouTube video came as a reference where it was a very short, brief video where I was informed through that video. I got to know that Professor, or I would say Dr. Kham Suan Hausing he was awarded the best paper award for ethnicity in the northeast part of India. And I was very intrigued by that. I haven't seen the paper, of course. So I thought, let me connect with the doctor and let me ask him what was this all about. And it was I was very intrigued. He's done his MPhil, he's done his PhD from JNU, and he's been a scholar. So let's welcome Dr. Khamkon Swan Hausing. Sir, good evening and Jai Hind.
Good evening, Major Ali. Thanks for having me on your show.
Thank you very much for spending time. I was very intrigued mainly by the Best Paper Award of 2023 on politics, on territory, politics, governance. So could you tell us a bit about this award, sir?
Yeah, Major Ali, this is an award which is given by the Regional Studies Association based in United Kingdom, which runs, around six high impact factor journals. One of which is territory politics governance, and territory politics governance and all the six high impact factor journals, which are run by the Regional Studies Association, which is the professional association of scholars and academics on working on territorial or regional politics in Europe or for much part of the world, give recognition to academics who make cutting edge research on the specific domain that they are interested in. So I was honored as well as lucky that my paper titled Autonomy and the Territorial Management of Ethnic Conflicts in Northeast India was selected as the best paper for the journal Territory Politics Governance. So this paper, in effect, is an attempt to draw a typology of actually existing autonomy in Northeast India under three rubrics. What I call as homeland state autonomy model, which applies in the case of Nagaland under Article 371A and Mizoram under Article 371Z, and what I call decentralized autonomy model, which apply in the case of the six settled areas, the exemplar of which is the Bodoland Territorial Council. And I also look at another model of autonomy, which I called as devolutionary autonomy, which applies outside the ambit of the six schedule, and two exemplars of this model are the hill areas of Manipur, where you have actually existing six district councils and six autonomous councils for the plain tribes in Assam. So I drew up a typology of autonomy by looking at a set of analytical variables, which I call it as identity preserving variables, to look at how identity preserving variables, to the extent that it is central in driving autonomy demands in deeply divided place in Northeast India, is central to determining or defining the outcome of autonomy in Northeast India. For example, I compared the case of Nagas or the Mizos by contending that in the case of the Nagas and the Mizo, land is central to the autonomy mobilization, to the extent that the Nagas, for example, in the articulation of their self-determination demands since the late 1940s, keep land sovereign command over land and resources as central to the Naga nationalist mobilization. And to the extent that the Naga nationalists had been successful in driving a popularly sustained movement for self-determination around the pivotal importance of land and resources, I contend that these play an important part in determining a more robust outcome of autonomy. in the case of the Nagas and the Mizos. And if you would know, Article 371A, for example, is considered to be the most robust identity preserving constitutional provision, to the extent that it is the only constitutional provision which allows the Nagaland Legislative Assembly exclusive control over land and resources, to the extent that the Legislative Assembly of Nagaland, by a simple majority, can neutralize or make inapplicable any law made by the parliament on identity preserving powers but pertaining to land and resources, despite the fact that mines and minerals, for example, or natural resources, for example, are considered to be eminent domain of the state, in the sense that the parliament has the exclusive eminent powers to legislate on land and resources, including mines, mineral, and natural resources, by invoking national interest. And once this eminent domain is invoked by the parliament, then the central government can legislate laws which would be applicable across the board, across Indian states. But in the case of Nagaland, for example, the Legislative Assembly of Nagaland is given exceptional power to not make applicable such law made by the parliament. And I contend that central to this assumption is the idea that because the subnationalist or the nationalist mobilization of the Nagas had been driven and centered around these identity preserving powers, and they have been successful in negotiating and sharing sovereignty on matters pertaining to land and resources, and timely recognition of that right early on. Look at the Akbar-Hidari Agreement of 1947, whereby this idea was accepted, and it was given concrete foundation via the 16-point agreement, which laid the foundation of the formation of Nagaland when the state was created in 1962, December 1962. You have, an important explanatory variable as to why particular autonomy mobilizations, which are essentially structured around land and resources or identity preserving powers, tend to be more robust in terms of its outcome on identity preserving powers. Such case, for example, such demand has not been very, very pivotal, for example, in the case of decentralized or devolutionary autonomy in Bodoland or in the hill areas of Manipur, because I contend, for example, in the case of Bodos, that early on since the 1930s, when the Bodos began to mobilize, although intermittently, their demand was centered around the question of greater representation or linguistic or cultural preservation. And although land entered, as a latecomer into the fray of negotiation or bargaining, it has not been as central or pivotal in driving the Bodo subnationalist mobilization. And to that extent, I contend that because there is no popularly sustained movement in the case of Bodo, or in the case of the hill areas of Manipur, or in the case of the plain tribes in Assam, they have not been successful in determining a very more or less circumscribed autonomy, because the sixth schedule, for example, does not have the plenary power to regulate on transfer of land from tribal to non-tribal. So, and for that matter, in the hill areas of Manipur, which is a devolutionary autonomy, the terms of autonomy are inscribed in the statute and laws of the Parliament 1971, when the original act for district council was created, because Manipur was then union territory. And subsequently, when Manipur became a full-fledged state, you have the proviso of this district council, which are amended from time to time. The vagaries of the political will of the sub-state level, in effect, determine to a large extent, the outcome of autonomy. And that is precisely where the Hill Areas Committee or the District Council in the Hill Areas of Manipur had not been, powerful enough, because they have been given only advisory or recommendatory powers when it comes to identity preserving powers. And that is the kind of model that can be drawn. So when you compare the centrality of such analytical variable like identity preserving power, timely negotiation of such autonomy provisions across the board in Northeast India, you can possibly draw three distinctive type of autonomy, which I think are critical in territorially managing ethnic conflicts in deeply divided place like Northeast India. So that's a brief summary of what I have to say in this paper.
Right. Also, I would like to ask you, how much research did you do to put up this paper? I mean, because getting the best paper award for 2023 in such a prestigious university, it is a matter of great pride. In fact, for the whole country, I would say I would say people from Manipur, be it Mirabai Chanu, be it Mary Kom, be it anyone, be it the Nagas, be it the Maites, be it the Cookies, they are contributing a great deal to our country's pride, to our country's prestige. We have Ratan Theram. He's very well established, very well known in theatre circuits. So I would like to know, it is a very big deal. How much research and what involved in preparing for this paper, sir?
This research is sponsored by the Indian Council of Social Science for Social Research under its flagship program called IMPRESS, Impactful Policy Research in Social Science. So, although this is in effect a major project sponsored by ICSSR between 2019 and 2021, it is in effect a continuum of long-standing research that I undertook since my MPhil days, since 2002, which is around 20 years. So after having engaged on this area, on territorial management of ethnic conflict, on issues of autonomy, on issues of power sharing, on the politics of accommodation, I have the fortune of interviewing extensive elites, political elites across Assam, in Manipur, in Nagaland, as well as in Mizoram. And I have over time interviewed close to 200, high-ranking political elites, bureaucrats from political parties, from civil society organizations, so on and so forth. And because of this long-standing engagement, I have been able to refine, some of the insights that I have gleaned over the years. And as you know, publishing in a professional journal having very high impact factor is not very easy. And given the emphasis that UGC has of late given on publishing in high impact factor journals and giving incentive, monetary as well as financial incentive for publication in such high impact factor journals, although we are making some mark across social science disciplines, I think if you look across the board, whether scholars from Northeast India or scholars from other parts of India, you still have very limited presence of Indian academia or Indian universities or colleges in such highly professionalized, high impact factor journals. So to that extent, that having entry into such type of high impact factor journals, which has large academic audience as well as high respect in academic circle, is certainly a signal honor as well as privilege for some of us. And I count myself as very lucky, to have been recognized for the cutting edge research that I contribute in terms of this article.
Right. And lastly, I also have one more question for you. The time you spent outside Manipur, let's say in Delhi, in JNU, times in Hyderabad, so which are not in the northeast part of India, how has been your experience in outside Manipur, in Delhi, in Hyderabad, and other places, sir?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. In fact, I came out of Manipur after having completed my class 12 in 1995, and I did my graduate studies, that is BA studies, from Ambala, Kent, in SD College, Sanatan Dharma College, which is an extension of the SD College, Lahore. And very interestingly, I studied at a place where Sushma Swaraj, the former speaker of the Lok Sabha,
You
also
mentioned
studied there.
95. You mentioned
Yeah,
95.
95 to
So,
19.
which means you're just slightly elder to me, so I would call you Oo. How are
Okay,
you?
thank
Go
you.
ahead, please.
Yeah. So I studied in SD College, and very interestingly, I studied at a time where the college, because of the emphasis on Hindi medium, To my surprise, I was taught even sometimes English, one of the papers that we have to opt for in Hindi. So that becomes an interesting, benchmark for me to learn Hindi, spoken Hindi, in terms of making, learning how to understand academic language in Hindi in the class. And subsequently, when I studied in JNU during my MA, MPhil, and PhD, I get a larger circle of friends from across the country where I certainly use that occasion to refine and polish my understanding and hold on the spoken Hindi. And when I got the first academic assignment in Banaras Hindu University, where I taught for over 8 years, because of again the emphasis on Hindi mediums, where some of the section have to be taught in Hindi, not just taught, but papers have to be evaluated in Hindi. Remember that for some of the non-Hindi speaking, states like us who come from Manipur, we had to opt for Hindi till class 8, right? And I luckily somehow managed to read Hindi, and this readability of Hindi, in effect, was added an advantage too when I learned, colloquial Hindi in my exposure at Ambala Kent during my BA, in MA, MPhil, PhD at JNU, and subsequently when I began to teach at Banaras Hindu University, I was asked to teach some of the Hindi medium sections, where I not only teach, but I also had to evaluate answer script in Hindi. So those were the times which, in effect, was used very fruitfully, I would say, because especially the kind of challenges that we had in Banaras Hindu University was a peculiar kind, where we have to teach sometimes between four to six papers, and maybe around sometimes 18 to 20 classes a week, where you are exposed to a very wide range of subjects, from Malaysia, Nepal, Singapore, to Indian national movement, to Indian constitution, international relations, theory, as well as practice, so and so forth, which turned out to be a blessing in disguise for me, because my academic horizon was broadened because of the extensive exposure to a vast interdisciplinary themes as well as subject domain, which I had not seriously taken up during the course of my studies, whether at the BA or at the MA MPhil level. So in that sense, my exposure to different cultural milieu in North India, in Ambala Ken, in Delhi, a very metropolitan, very cosmopolitan, and to a more local, but the heartland of India, as it were, in Banaras, open up both my academic as well as social exposure, to such an extent that I have been able to nurture, a large, kind of exposure, both socially, culturally, as well as politically, and also to a varied way of looking at society and politics at large. So, to that extent, I think that my varied exposure in different places in Indian cities, both as a student as well as research scholar and teacher, have to some extent sharpened my understanding and my ability to apply the kind of ideas, complex ideas, that I assimilate over the years, to kind of have a hands-on experience, to be readily applicable across different cultural as well as political contexts. So when I come to Hyderabad since 2012, and before that, I had the honor of having the Fulbright Nehru postdoctoral fellowship at University of Pennsylvania at Philadelphia. So I used that 1 year experience again to get exposed to a different international audience, as well as cosmopolitan culture, as well as cutting edge academic research, which also open up new vista of interaction with some of the leading authorities in my areas. Like my mentor during my postdoc, during my Fulbright, was Professor Brendan O'Leary, who is considered to be the leading authority on federalism as well as power sharing and the politics of accommodation. And I have been lucky enough to imbibe and use much of this cutting edge research as well as understanding of these complex dynamics, not only in the context of Northeast India, but also in larger part of the world. Because my mentor, for example, has worked extensively on Ireland, on Iraq, on Sudan, on Nigeria, and other deeply divided places. So, in that extent, my wide exposure, which happened by happenstance, by chance, in effect, had been very critical in shaping up my academic horizon as well as my outlook academically.
Right. I from being from Delhi, but I love the northeast part of India, be it Manipur, be it Nagaland, be it Mizoram, be it Tripura, be it Arunachal, be it Meghalaya, be it the Seven Sisters and One Brother, Sikkim. So I love people from the northeast part of India, and in fact, I am very. I personally have very dear friends who are Maites, who are Nagas, who are Cookies, who are Jaintias, who are Garos, Khasi from Meghalaya, who are Chakmas from Mizoram, who are Apatamis from Arunachal, who are the Burmans from Tripura. In fact, many good friends. I want to ask you the last question before I let you go. Has this entire Manipur conflict that is happening over there, the trouble over there, I'm sure you must be having a lot of Maite friends as well. Has it affected your personal relationship or equation with your friends who are Maite, sir?
Uh, it has dented to a certain extent, but I think it has not adversely affected in the sense that I still believe that despite all this mayhem and madness that seems to intoxicate many minds as well as the way we interact across the board, I still believe that there are a lot of my friends, both in the academia, from Manipur, who belongs to the Meitei community, who still have this, hope in humanity, and who, in fact, are critical about a particular form of leadership as well as state-society interaction, which, in effect, are all clear for us to see. Because in deeply divided place like Manipur, when the state capitulate to powerful social force, and mind you that this is something which is not unique or specific to Manipur, but can be applicable across the board. If you look at some of these cutting edge research by Atul Kohli or Brendan O'Leary or many of these scholars who in fact point out that in deeply divided places, not only in Manipur, but in Iraq or in Ireland or in Sudan or name it, right, in Denmark, in Switzerland, in Canada, so and so forth, when powerful societies begin to capture state power, which seems to be the case in Manipur, unfortunately, then the terms of political discourse become deeply problematic and it unleashes conflicts, multi-layered conflicts. And this is precisely what my take on Manipur conflict is. Although there are different angles of looking at Manipur conflict in terms of a conflict between ethnic groups. But essentially I see this as a long-term outgrowth of institutional crisis in the state. And in fact, when I say this, I borrowed this idea from the state society, academic literature, which in effect points to the fact that the state as a part of the society is a very autonomous space. And when it loses its autonomy and got capitulated into powerful social force, then you have crisis of legitimacy because different segment of the society lost trust, right? And loyalty to the state. And when this happens, you can have multidimensional conflicts. And that is precisely what seems to obtain in the case of Manipur, and which is unfortunate. And therefore, for someone who looks at this problematics from an academic point of view, I see that this does not have any bearing whatsoever on the kind of friendship that you have with your friends in Meitei community or Naga community or even Kuki-Zomi community to which I belong. So to that extent, I think so long as we can rise above board and see this conflict very objectively, then I do not see that this conflict would have adverse implication on our relationship across the board in Manipur.
Right. Very well said. Very well said by you. In fact, the Maites have been very, very dear friends with me, and they have been very loving and caring with me. The cookies have been very loving and caring with me. The Nagas have been very loving and caring with me. So I, being in colloquial language, if I say Mayank, if I being a Mayank, they've been so nice and kind and loving to me. I don't understand why can't people in Manipur, in fact, with all love for them, in fact, my heart bleeds for them, for every single community tribe over there who are bleeding, who are suffering right now. I really hope and wish and pray that peace genuinely, I mean, that peace returns to Manipur very soon. Thank you, brother doctor. It was a pleasure speaking to you and great learning, sir. Thank you very much. Jai Hind, sir.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ali, for having me on board. Yeah, Jai Hind.